At long last, it's finally time. I've been sitting on this one for a bit since the last movie took its sweet-ass time to come out, and now that it has, it's time to finally review all of Sailor Moon Crystal. Yes, I said all, because I don't trust Toei, and worst case scenario, I'd rather have one video get flagged than 5 of them. Announced as a faithful retelling of the original manga by Naoki Takeuchi to celebrate the 20th anniversary, this series was treated as a big deal when it was announced. They brought in Naoko herself to help out like before, Moe or Clover Z was brought in to do the opening and ending songs, they even brought in the director of One Piece Strong World to help out. So naturally, with all this talent and hype, they initially released the series on Nico Nico. Okay, so it started off on a bad note. But hey, maybe the later seasons help Crystal regain its footing. Well, we got Chiaki Kon as the director, who is incredibly hit or miss with her works. But the animation did improve, as did the story a bit, so if they continue in this positive direction, they could make a decent, the last 2 arcs or movies. Oh, and they swapped out directors with someone who is inexperienced with directing movies. All of this was over the course of 9 years. It took them until after Sailor Moon's 30th anniversary to finish this project. But what is Crystal about anyways? Well, let's dive in. Sailor Moon Crystal follows Usagi Tsukino, a middle school student who gets special powers one day and uses them to fight evil. Along the way, she gets friends who also have similar powers, including a guy dressed in a tuxedo, and then they find out they're reincarnations from a past life where they were part of the Moon Kingdom, and the tuxedo guy was actually from Earth. The prince specifically, and romantically involved with the Moon Princess, aka Usagi, in a past life. After that, they have to deal with threats in the future, as well as Usagi's future kid, also named Usagi. They shorten it to Chibiusa. Then they have to deal with a threat from outer space, find 4 other friends who have ties to the other planets in the solar system, one of which gets reincarnated, then an evil circus, and then another intergalactic threat to close out the series. So basically a Super Sentai / Power Rangers plot, but for the female audience. Simple, but very effective, which is probably part of the reason that this series is so fucking popular, outside of the story genuinely being really damn good. In the manga, that is. Crystal, unfortunately, has this issue across all of its seasons and the movies, where it hits the fucking fast forward button on the manga, and as such leads to incredibly rushed pacing, and not a lot of time spent processing the information we're given before we move on to the next plot point. As such, any intrigue or depth on the cast that you might have, except for Usagi and Mamoru, the tuxedo guy I mentioned earlier, is next to non-existent in this version because they're given their introductions and then are just background help for the rest of the series. Even in the Eternals movie, where they are given some info on their backstories, it goes by so quickly that it feels like a footnote to that character rather than something important. And that's a damn shame. Meanwhile, Usagi and Mamoru are given a lot more depth and character development even with the rush pacing, which is great for those 2, but there's more than just 2 members of the team. It'd be like if in Power Rangers they had a team of 6, but the writers only really cared about developing 1 or 2 of them. Oh wait, that's just Sarah, never mind. Speaking of cooking, fuck, the villains suck in this series. One note, hardly any development or depth. Just walls to be knocked down by our main cast, which was also a problem in the manga, so it doesn't adapt the good parts of the manga properly, but it has no issue adapting the worst elements? Fuck off. Oh, and it's not even a full 1-to-1 adaptation, because Jadeite survived longer than he did in the manga. Same with Nephrite.
You had one job to do.
Oh, and, of course, the dumbest change personally, the revelation that the 4 Kings of Heaven, Mamoru's guards in the past life, were in love with the other members of the Sailor Scouts. So, in the original manga and the 90s version, one of the reasons Mamoru and Usagi's relationship, in their past life, was special was because Usagi was the princess of the Moon Kingdom, while Mamoru was the prince of the Earth Kingdom. Space Romeo and Juliet, basically, since the relationship wasn't supposed to be known by either kingdom, nor allowed. By giving that same trait to the other members of the Sailor Scouts, however, it removes one of the key things that made Mamoru and Usagi's relationship so special, and it also removes the point of it being fucking secretive when the other Guardians were also doing it. I understand that it's based on this image, and that it's basically what was planned the entire time from Takeuchi. I'd still tell her to get off the fucking bath salts if I was the editor back then, because this idea sounds absolutely fucking asinine and only hurts the main relationship rather than helps it for reasons I already explained above. So yes, it is more faithful to the original manga, but it not only showcases the flaws of the source material much more clearer, but it also creates new ones thanks to its rushed pacing and some baffling additions that only hurt the show more than help it. And this was to celebrate Naoki Takeuchi's magnum opus. And sure, the last 2 arcs finally got proper adaptations, and the animation/art style is gorgeous. But like a monkey's paw, It only accomplished the bare minimum and added 7 layers of negatives that made the wish not worth it at all, as the pacing sucks, leading to the plot not making much sense due to its crunch runtime, and a lot of the emotional moments like Usagi staying by a slowly dying Mamoru's side not working all that well because they had to fit all that into a 2-hour 40-minute movie. Same thing also happens to when Mamoru dies at the start of the Cosmos movie. It's like, oh okay, that happened. Oh well, on to something completely different. Also, for some reason, Chibiusa isn't erased from the timeline when Mamoru dies at the start, but when Mamoru jumps into the Galaxy Cauldron later in the movie and dies again, she is erased. That's not how that works. Especially because, as we find out after this fight, Usagi was already pregnant. Okay, before I make a complete ass out of myself, more than I already do, I want to make this addendum. She does suddenly get pregnant when this itty-bitty circle enters her body. So, basically, Usagi is the Virgin Mary in this version, because it's after this circle is absorbed by Usagi that Usagi states she's suddenly pregnant. So, basically Mamoru got cucked by a star. I just can't get over that. Cucked by a fucking star. Let's continue. So, okay. The art style did improve as time went on, which is nice. The music is fine. But everything else about Crystal, whether it be the 3 seasons of the TV/Nico Nico series or the 2 movies, either showcases Naoka's weaknesses as an author for this series, or creates new issues, and as a result, it creates an anime adaptation that's, personally speaking at least, weaker than the 90s version. And if we're taking up the adaptation element, weaker than the manga. And it pisses me off to say that, because I was hyped to see this series back when it was first announced, as someone who only grew up with portions of the 90s anime. This was my first chance to see the series properly from start to finish. But as the years went on, waiting for this to fucking finish, it only got worse in my eyes. Then I decided to check out the other adaptations Sailor Moon was associated with, including reading the original manga itself, before I rewatched Crystal for this video, and honestly it made it hurt even more for me. Because I've seen what this franchise is capable of. I've seen some genuinely emotional moments come out of this series, like the initial death of the Sailor Scouts in the season 1 finale of the 90s series, and Usagi and Mamoru's relationship blossom over the course of the manga. I've seen some great fucking fights, and some of the best manga art in the industry, on par with the late Kentaro Miura and the IG Chika group, the artists behind Record of Ragnarok, and so on and so forth. But Crystal is what happens when you give someone all the resources to make something, and they give you something they made an hour before the deadline was due. But at least it looks pretty. At the very least, I finally got to see this to completion, so there is some silver lining to this, but honestly, I would just recommend reading the manga. But that's just me. I understand and get that there are fans of Crystal, and frankly, more power to those people. Just because I dislike something doesn't mean you have to share in my misery. Enjoy what you enjoy, basically. So that concludes this review. I'm David Grimm, and thank you for watching.